us. It's going to cost our relationships. It's going to cost us in terms of money, financial outcomes. It will cost us also in terms of um, like our growth, our personal development. It's going to obviously cost us in terms of our ability to be able to stand out and to ultimately contribute in a greater way. And ultimately will cost you achieving your dreams, because when we have this dependence and this attachment and this people pleasing, we often will hold back on chasing our dreams because we're worried about what other people think and whether they'll approve of us. And ultimately, this is what my dilemma was when I was, contemplating leaving corporate. Was the dilemma I had was, would I be, still have the approval of my parents, because I'm stepping into a space that they necessarily didn't encourage when I was leaving school. And so I was thinking, oh, it's going to cost me my relationship with my parents. And so I knew I was going to be challenged by my parents, because it was again against what they viewed as the way in which you live life, in essence. And so I was willing to take that challenge because I had the support of Adriana, my wife. And so I had support through her, and I knew I'd be challenged through my parents, but that sort of balance, that mix, enabled me to explore the unknown, to be able to start detaching from that area that I thought was, in essence, people pleasing, which was working in a corporate job, doing the corporate thing. So that ultimately wasn't where I was going to thrive. So I knew that, and hence why I stepped out, and I've never looked back. In terms of, it was, a challenging, very challenging. And I think I've really grown a lot from taking that step away from people pleasing and having approval from my parents in terms of the career I was doing, and now doing something that I love doing and I can turn up on a public holiday to do. So what is it costing you in terms of relationships by people pleasing? Because ultimately, what will happen in a relationship, if you're people pleasing all the time, you're trying to just conform to how they want you to be. And so if you don't conform, so I guess the behavior that it drives into you and the wiring in your brain is that if I do the opposite, they won't love me. And therefore I'm going to keep doing what they want me to do. But it's not necessarily you. You're trying to be someone else in order to fit into that relationship. And so what that relationship of conforming and saying yes is costing you is you. It's costing you your identity. It's costing you your ability to thrive. And so what that can cost over time to you is it can create low self-esteem, low self-worth, because you lose who you are. You start to lose ultimately yourself, because you're so wanting to do what others want you to do, as opposed to the things that are really true and deeply meaningful and purposeful to you, true to your soul, true to your spirit. So what we want the relationship to evolve as is that respect for one another of who they are, and helping one another thrive in terms of who they are, as opposed to saying that this is the way you should do in order to win my love, in order to win my approval. Because when you place conditions around love, it's not true love. So there's no conditions around love. It's unconditional. So you love, ultimately, love is loving the person for who they are, not for what or how they do things for you, or them fitting in with how you want them to behave. It's loving both sides of them. It's loving when they do the things that support you and also do the things that challenge you, because ultimately the relationship grows through that challenge. You've probably noticed that when you've had tough times and you've been most challenged in your relationship, it's prospered as a result of that. Or if it didn't, then it was meant to go the way it did, in terms of in your own separate ways, because by staying together, you were both going to ultimately not thrive. You both were going to struggle and basically get down to that lowest common denominator of just holding things together by just doing enough people pleasers and yes sirs and no sirs, just to hold it together by a paper thin thread. Ultimately, you want the relationship to prosper, and that requires the balance between the challenging of one another and supporting one another. But it's finding that nice mix for one another and respecting one another for who each other is, as opposed to wanting them to be someone. So that's how it can cost you in relationships. It will cost you your identity of or you living the life that you want to live. That ultimately you'll be lost and you'll be regretful long term because of that. You'll start to develop resentment for to that person because that's the way you've chosen the relationship to evolve through people pleasing. Ultimately, you want it to evolve through supporting one another and challenging one another, and ultimately being respectful for one another and allowing each other to be who they are, as opposed to you wanting them to be the person that you want them to be in that relationship. And ultimately, that comes from you seeing how your parents interacted, and that's how you think relationships are. Ultimately, you need to find the way in which how you want to be in a relationship, how you want to show yourself, how you want to show up, and you want that to be respected both sides. So it's a path of a journey of entanglement, of challenge, support, hard times, good times, but it's all together and it's all part of the growth of the relationship. In terms of what is it costing you in finances, well, if you're saying yes to clients or yes to opportunities that you don't really want to do or don't think that you have the capacity to do, then ultimately it's going to come at a cost because you won't be able to service the customer well, and they are going to have you're going to damage your reputation, and they're not going to use your services again because you didn't serve them well, because you just thought that that's the way you just take any business that comes your way, and you don't consider whether it's the right type of business and whether you have the ability to serve that growth or that new business. And so ultimately, we don't want to just say yes to every opportunity that comes our way, because what will happen is we'll get to spread too thin and we'll become exposed and we'll damage our reputation. So we want to accept the work that's really aligned to the organization's values and ultimately the direction, the strategic direction of the organization. But we don't want to take on any work because we're not specialists in that, and we ultimately not going to get the greatest result for the customer. So we want to do what's in the best interest of the customer and say no to the work that's not aligned in terms of our strategic direction or your strategic direction. So it can really cost you in terms of your vocation or in the area of work you are by saying yes to everything, by thinking that that's the way in which you grow, and ultimately that growth won't be the growth that you're seeking and eventually will result in reputational damage. It's the same as money or money opportunities, or where do you invest your money? If you say yes to every opportunity that looks flashy and sparkly, then your money, well, first of all, you're throwing money away in essence. It's not well considered as to whether that money's going to be aligned to whether you can get it back, or whether you can use it within a time frame that you want to use it within, or whether it's trapped up and locked up, and so ultimately we want to make decisions that are better aligned to our financial goals and not say yes to every financial opportunity, because there's always financial opportunities that will come on your radar. And so I think it's really important to understand what is most important for you in that point in time in terms of your financial goals. And that's going to change over time, but that's going to allow you to make better decisions in terms of saying no to financial opportunities if you have a financial plan, if you have a financial strategy. It's the same as customers, taking on new customers. You've got to filter them as to whether they're aligned to what you're seeking, and ultimately in the area that you want to grow. Because if they're not, then it's saying no. And so this is the same as relationships, is if your partner asks you to do something that you don't want to do, say no, and be comfortable saying no, because it's ultimately you're not going to do it well. You're going to ultimately let them down because you're not going to do it as they want you to do it, because you're not them. They're going to have the expectation that you'll do it just like them. So it's really, I mean, this is in certainly the relationship part of things. It's really active listening and understanding where each person's coming from in order to evolve that relationship. Otherwise, if you don't understand why they're saying no, then you will feel rejected. But if you ultimately understand the reason why they're saying no, you'll have an understanding, and that you'll have I guess a better perspective and understanding as to why they're saying no. So it's really important that you know the direction you're going in. So you need to know yourself in order to be able to define your boundaries. And so, but in order to start to know yourself, you've got to start to say no to things, because if you're constantly saying yes, you're scattered too thin, and you'll lose touch with yourself, and you'll lose touch with what you want to do and what's truly important to you, because you're saying yes to everything and you're doing everything yes, yes, yes. And so you'll lose yourself in this process, and you'll struggle to then develop the boundaries that you need to put in place in order to define yourself and in order to find yourself. So the boundaries really define us. The boundaries really start to tell people who we are and let people know who we are. And so that then people can love the person that you are demonstrating that you are. So by saying no, if you're constantly saying yes, that you're like a chameleon, you're just trying to fit in. The person doesn't really know who you are. So by setting the boundaries, we define who we are, and we discover ourselves in that process, because it allows time to check in with ourselves. Was that was that a good decision? Did you feel comfortable with making that decision? What did you do as an alternate option as opposed to doing what they wanted you to do? Did that feel more aligned to your soul, your heart? If yes, then yes, it was the right decision. If no, and you're not quite sure, then again, at least you explored it. At least you tried something new. Ultimately, just saying yes all the time for the sake of people pleasing is just losing yourself in the crowd, getting lost in the crowd of what everyone else is doing. In order to stand out, we need to start saying no. We need to define our boundaries, and then we, I guess, start to find ourselves in that process, because we start to really get in touch with what inspires us, what lifts us up, as opposed to constantly just not knowing whether it's lifting you up or dragging you down. So say no. Start defining who you are. If you got a financial opportunity presented to you, start to assess it and start to think about what you want. What are your needs, wants? What are your desires? Is it aligned to that? If it's not, then it's a no. But start to consider things, as opposed to just staying a spontaneous yes because you think it's going to make you lots of money. You're going to be a millionaire overnight, because most likely that doesn't happen. That doesn't. Ultimately, we need to keep the money invested in order for it to compound, because the way in which we make money is through compounding. It's the compound effect of money. So it's very hard to do quick entries in and out, because you don't get the eighth wonder of the universe, which Warren Buffett defined it as, and that's the law of compounding. And ultimately, that's where people make their money, is through that compounding effect. So jumping into opportunities and jumping out all the time, you're going to lose money. Ultimately, you might get some wins, but over time, if you keep doing it, there's probably going to be more losses than wins. So it's going to cost you financially. It costs you in relationships. It costs you in terms of your growth and development. It will cost you in business. It will cost you in your vocation, all these areas, because you're spreading yourself too thin. You're losing yourself. You lose your identity. You get low self-esteem, low self-worth, and then you don't know where to start climbing out of this mess. So the way in which you get out of it is start defining your boundaries. Start saying no to things that don't really excite you or inspire you. If they're just a me, or sort of nah, or we'll see. But there's no point also that saying yes and hoping something better pops up so you can give an excuse or something like that. You, over time, that may be the way in which you do it, but over time you'll get more comfortable, more certain, the more you know yourself around your decisions, and you won't sort of say a tentative yes and then see if something better comes up and then give excuses. That's the way in which you sort of start this process generally. um, Obviously, if you find yourself very quickly and aligning yourself to your values, it's probably worth talking a bit about what's important to you, and it's the things that really give you energy. What sparks you up? What are the things that you get invited to that you've got constant energy for and you feel energized afterwards? They're the things that you want to say yes to. The things that you say yes to and you feel dragged and de-energized, they're the ones you want to say no to. So that should help in terms of that, working out whether it's the right thing.